Welcome to Microfiche Microphone. I'm Micah, and on this channel we look at microfiche from the past, old newspaper articles in the public domain, and we look at them with our modern eyes, our modern perspective, and see what we can learn from them. On this microfiche time capsule, we're looking at Kansas Farmer from 16 November 1918, and this article is entitled Feeding Starving Europe, which could be quite heavy. At the time, since Europe had been at war for so many years already, that there was some major food shortages in some areas, and the United States didn't have that problem to that extent because they hadn't been at war, and the war itself was not taking place on their own land, which meant that those left behind during the war were able to continue to farm and continue to produce the food to feed the country. So it rested then upon the Americans to help to feed Europe, who had been at war for so long. So let's take a look, because I think this will be quite interesting. All right, feeding starving Europe. It has taken food to win the war, but now that it is won, the obligation to feed the starving peoples of Europe is even heavier upon us. The Food Administration is essentially a war organization, but peace is bringing food problems quite as great or greater than those of war. How we shall solve these new problems is for the President, Congress, and the public to decide. In a statement sent out by the Food Administration just before the armistice was signed by the German envoys, it was pointed out that the need for food conservation and the elimination of all waste by the American people was never so great as at the present time. Yeah, I think that's putting it mildly. Yeah. Last year, the Food Administration's requests were very largely for the substitution of one food for another. This year's actual saving is required on all foods. Before the war, with normal reserves and normal conditions prevailing, with plenty of agricultural labor, our exports to the Allied countries averaged 5,533,000 tons of food per year. Last year, we were able to export to them 11,820,000 tons. And this year, we have assumed the burden of sending them a minimum of 17,550,000 tons. Wow, that's a huge increase. That's more than 3 times what they sent before. Unfortunately, the common belief throughout the country seems to be that the 1918 crop was a phenomenally large one, and that in consequence there exists in this country a great plenitude of food, and the time for saving has therefore passed. This rather universal belief can be understood when it is remembered that last year wheat received the greatest emphasis in the pleas for food saving, so that quite naturally public attention generally centered around the condition of the then forthcoming wheat crop. When the harvest time was reached and the crop assured, showing an increase of more than 250 million bushels, conditions of the other crops indicated that they would also show phenomenal increase. Then followed adverse weather conditions that cut down production in other crops. But the opinion accepted at that time by the country at large that plenitude was to prevail has not been changed. Actual production conditions, as shown by the figures of the Department of Agriculture for October 1, show that the 1918 crop, as compared with that of 1917, is as follows. Increase: wheat, 268 million bushels; barley, 27 million bushels; rice, 5 million bushels; rye, 17 million bushels; buckwheat, 2 million bushels; beans, 3 million bushels. Total, 322 million bushels. Decrease: corn, wow, that's a lot. Corn, 442 million bushels, decrease. Wow. Oats, 52 million bushels, decrease. Potatoes, 52 million bushels. Sweet potatoes, 2 million bushels, for a total of 548 million bushel decrease. Ooh, that's a net decrease. That's bad. The apparent loss, however, is counterbalanced by the fact that the nutritional value of the corn this year will be very much higher than that of last. How did they know that? And there will be less spoilage. How did they know that? Also, a portion of last year's crop, in the form largely of an increased number of hogs remaining on the farm, adds to our resources. It seems fair, therefore, to assure that our actual food resources and life-sustaining value are about the same as those of last year. If they say so. That would be quite concerning to me. I don't know about you. Wow. The increase of 50% in exports to the Allied nations to which we have pledged ourselves is a minimum. It is based upon the lowest measurement of necessities for those countries. Any change in food conditions that can possibly occur will add to our obligations with no possibility of subtraction, as there will be 180 million people looking to the United States for food, in addition to the 120 million Allied population as well as our own. Yeah, that's a lot of people, not gonna lie. The increase to which we have pledged ourselves is as a minimum is based upon shipping conditions and relates to the transportation to and maintenance of American soldiers on the battlefront. From New York to Liverpool is 3,036 miles, as compared with 6,258 miles from Buenos Aires, 10,680 from Bombay, and 11,890 from Australia. The shipping of the world at the beginning of the war, with no heavy drafts upon it for the transportation of troops, was none too large to meet the world demands. It then totaled about 48,500,000 tons. On August 1, 1918, the estimate of sinking was placed at about 15 million tons, so that with shipping, as with food, an increase in demand must be met with a decreased supply. That's not good. That's definitely not ideal. This curtailment of shipping has made imperative the maintenance of the straight line across the sea. The maintenance of the straight line. What does that mean? What does that mean? Like, I understood that there was a certain route that they sailed because of the trade winds. The maintenance of the straight line across the sea. Maybe they mean that there's always one behind a ship. So you send out a ship, and then you send out another ship, and then you send out another ship, until they form a line. Is that what they mean? I hope that's what they mean. Otherwise, that doesn't really make much sense, does it? Predominance in manpower was essential under the changed conditions of war, which allowed open fighting to be forced, and the existing food program gave this advantage to the Allied forces by the addition of the American troops allowed to be sent over. Through the saving, it made it shipping. Recent military results have fully justified all the food sacrifices this plan entailed upon our people and the people of the Allied countries. Before the war, or with normal conditions prevailing in production, our exports to the Allied countries were sufficient to ration completely about 6 million men per year. Last year, our exports to them were complete rations for about 22 million men. And this year, our minimum plans were for complete rations for 33 million men, added to by the burdens coming from the conquest of territory. I feel like if I were working in the government at this time, I would feel really overwhelmed with everything that had to be done. Like, that sounds like a lot of responsibility. The coming of peace will not add 1 pound of food to our supply. On the contrary, it enormously increases our food obligations because it allows us to reach with food the people of Poland, Romania, Serbia, Armenia, European Russia, and others who have been without food enough to keep their people alive. The total number of these peoples have been estimated at 180 million, some of whom have partial food resources and some of whom are now literally in a starving condition. Oh, geez. Oh, man. Summarized, then, our food condition is as follows. Our food resources are about the same as those of last year. The food needs will be enormously added to by the coming of peace. It should not be forgotten that the United States has more than 2 million men overseas. An immediate peace problem will be to get these men transported back. It has been estimated by the military authorities that this will take at least 2 years. Really? That seems strange to me. Yeah, you have 2 million troops, but, like, it'll take 2 years to get them all back? Because it didn't take that long to get them there. I mean, it couldn't have, because the war didn't even last that long. That seems fishy to me. Maybe they're not willing to spend as much money on it? Because of extraordinary demands to be made on shipping for the conveyance of food with the coming of peace, it seems probable that hope for the immediate transportation home of our troops will lie in being able to supply ships bringing troops with food supplied to carry back. Yeah, that makes sense to me. So you go there with a shipment of food, you send it to Europe, then you have an empty ship, fill it with troops, and come back, right? That there will be an imperative demand, especially on the part of the mothers of the country, for the quickest possible bringing home of the soldier boys. There can be no question. This means maintenance of the straight line of shipping for some time after the war. Makes sense to me. Just what provision we may feel necessary to make to supply Germany with food, or what safeguards are to be imposed in order that Germany will receive food only after the people overseas, who have been our friends and associates, are provided for, is a question for the future and for Congress. Oh, the person who wrote this, though, doesn't sound very friendly toward wanting to help Germany as a country to recover from the war. I feel like that was the general feeling after World War I, which is why there were so many reparations made upon Germany, which ended up killing their economy and left it open and vulnerable to the coming of Hitler. Fascism in general. I feel like the poorer a country is and the more desperate their situation, the quicker they will turn to extreme measures. And I think that's true of Germany post-World War I. And I mean, that feeling of, I don't know if we're even going to help them, like that feeling was relatively widespread. And you have to remember that not everyone in the country was on board with what the government was doing. So I don't think it's fair to say we're not going to help you at all because you started a war. Like, they are suffering. All you want to do is relieve suffering, is it not? I don't know. Kind of makes me want to cry. A most casual survey of the situation immediately convinces one that the necessity for America's supervision of food exports will be greater in the months immediately following the coming of peace than at any other time during the war. There must be no relaxation in the program laid out for the American people. The prevalent belief that with the coming of peace the old order of plenty will be restored is a dangerous one. Recent market events have shown that this belief is very widespread, and it is doubly unfortunate when accepted by the producers of the country, whose burdens will become heavier than ever with the coming peace. Yeah, this is more of a warning, I feel like, to those who are producers, which is most of the state of Kansas, yeah? For the wheat crop of 1917, the farmers of this country received an average price of $2.05 per bushel. For 1916, $1.44. For 1915, 98 cents. 1914, 99 cents. 1913, 79 cents. And estimated by the Bureau of Crop Estimates. In the past year, state averages, including states producing less than 1 million bushels, ranged from $1.83 per bushel in Utah to $2.66 in South Carolina. The 1918-1919 food program is both a national and a personal obligation. The nation has never failed to meet all obligations, and the individual must not. Anyway, I feel like, as though the point was, I feel like this is more of the government asking the producers of the country to please help with this enormous task of feeding starving Europeans, whose entire continent had just been at war, and they hadn't been able to produce much food. So I understand that, and I also, I love at the end how they're like, by the way, we've been paying a lot for wheat right now, so you should be grateful, you know? Like, that's true, the price went up way high, like doubled what it had been before, or sometimes more than that. So that's pretty impressive, but I feel like, I don't know, I feel like something like this didn't necessarily need to be said. However, I think that there are times and places where it does need to be said, and maybe this was one of them. Yeah, it's interesting to see how that was dealt with. Like I said, if I had been working in the government at the time, I would feel super overwhelmed with everything that needed to be done in regards to the like the peacetime, like setting up peace everywhere and rebuilding and helping other countries get up on their feet, or just helping them through the hardest of the hard times. that would be a lot to do. And feeling like, yeah, our country has a few issues, but in general, we're doing relatively well. So we can help. Yeah. It's a tough time. I mean, honestly, war is not a happy topic ever, but this is even laying out the peacetime, the beginning of the peacetime, and even that is very difficult as well. The first year or two after a large war, I mean, they called it the Great War at the time. Crazy. Anyways, so I hope you enjoyed the Microfiche time capsule, and I hope that you learned something from it. I think that in this case it was more about the seriousness of of establishing peace. So please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next video.